Hello, welcome to Thursday's edition of Cracking the Cryptic, and on screen we have a puzzle by none other than Ard van Wetering. Ard, of course, has made some of the most popular puzzles we've ever featured on Cracking the Cryptic, and this one certainly looks interesting. It's sort of a twist on a miracle Sudoku, but in quite an interesting way. So I'll tell you about the rules of this puzzle in a second. A couple of things I want to mention. We've got a bonus view over today on Patreon. It's free, it's not behind the paywall, but it's Mark solving one of the cryptic crosswords of Stephen Sondheim, the American composer. Now, some of you may or may not be aware that Stephen Sondheim actually is passionate about cryptic crosswords, and he produced, I think it was a weekly series, I want to say weekly, it may have been monthly series, in the New York magazine back in the late 60s. And anyway, we had some requests to see whether or not we could solve some of these puzzles, and Mark has had a go today. So there's about a 25-minute video over on Patreon. It's very interesting. It's a fascinating crossword. And yeah, a very interesting backstory to it. So I'll put a link under the video, obviously. What else do I want to mention? Oh, I want to give a shout out to Yalsha, who has created a time-lapse video in which they create some digital fan art of Mark and me. And I thought I would show you some of this. Hopefully I will get to include it in our title sequence as well. Look, here's this picture of Mark looking like a baddie in a magazine. And here's a picture of me looking much more like a goodie, except I have a rather large fleck of dandruff in my hair. But anyway, I thought this was really, I'm in awe of people who can draw like this. I would love to be able to, and unfortunately my attempts to copy Simpsons characters is about as far as it gets. Anyway, there we go. That's me and Mark, rendered by one of our fans, so big thank you to Yalsha for that. Now, let me tell you about the rules of this puzzle. We have got X Sudoku, which means these X's in the grid need to contain the digits 1 to 9. Obviously, it's normal Sudoku rules apart from this. So we've got to put 1 to 9 in the main diagonals. We've got a king's move restriction. So what does that mean? That means that if this cell was a chess king, it could move into those two squares. And therefore, neither of these squares, as well as all the usual squares, can't contain the digit 1. So basically any cell that's a king's, or any digit that's a king's move away, or any cell that's a king's move away from a digit cannot contain that digit. You know what I mean. And we've got these grey dominoes. Now these are fascinating. These need to contain 2-digit prime numbers. So yeah, that's all we know about those. And then the left hand of these dominoes, you can see I've put blue rings in each of these cells. These form a sort of slightly offset magic square. So let's remind ourselves quickly about the rules of magic squares. So magic squares, we need to make sure that, let's imagine this square was a magic square. It needs to contain all of the digits from 1 to 9. Each row, each column, and both diagonals in this square, if this was the magic square, would need to add up to the same number. Now, as we've looked at these a lot before, I'll just run through very quickly through the mathematics of this. We know that the digits 1 to 9 add to 45. Therefore, if each of these 3 rows adds to the same number, each of the rows must add to 45 divided by 3 is 15. So we now know that the rows, columns and diagonals of this box need to add to 15. And if you do a bit of work on that, you'll discover that the central digit of a magic square, which has this property, needs to contain the digit 5. And that's because this square uniquely, in all of the cells in this box, actually is part of 4 different ways of making that 15 total, because it's part of its column, its row, and both diagonals, and it's the only square that has that property. Now, the only digit that can be part of 4 different ways of making 15 is a 5, and that's because you can make 10 in 4 different ways using 1, 9, 2, 8, 3, 7 and 4, 6. So you can see that basically these are going to form the different ways of making 10. If you do a little bit more work, you'll actually discover that the 4 diagonal or 4 squares in the corners have to all be even numbers, and these 4 squares have to be odd numbers. And again, that's not too difficult to prove. I'll leave that as an exercise to the viewer. But it does give us a clue as to how we might start this puzzle. This square, I'm thinking. Right, so do have a go. Ard's puzzles, as I say, they're as popular as anything we ever publish. So they really are beautiful, beautiful Sudokus. And to play the puzzle, you click on the link under the video. With that, let's get cracking. Now, if this is the centre of the magic square, we obviously know this is the 5 from the logic I outlined at the start, which means that I have no idea what it means actually. We're gonna, I mean, this is the reason I titled the video something to do with Miracle Sudoku is obviously we've only got the digits 1 and 2 as givens. I mean, you could say that the magic square gives us a 5, and I guess it does, but it's certainly not replete with givens, is it? It's so let's think about this. Let's think about this logically. So we know the 4 corners of the magic square have to be even digits, so I'm going to label them up. We know these 4 cells have to be odd digits in the magic square. And they can't be 5, so these are 1, 3, 7 and 9. Now this one can't be a 2 because there's actually neither of these can be a 2 because this 2 sees both those positions. Always suspicious about anything like that in an Ard puzzle, because nothing, you know, with a puzzle with this few or this little information, everything that seems like it has, you know, it does things twice, it operates in 2 different ways, it makes me wonder. This square, look, can't be a 1 because of the king's move constraint, so let's get rid of the 1 there. And because of the, right, yeah, okay, because this can't be a 1, it's not possible for this square to be a 9 anymore, because we know that these 3 squares together need to add up to 15. So if this can't be a 1, there's no way this can be a 9, because if this is a 9, this would have to be a 1. And the same thing must be true with the 2s, mustn't it? So if this can't be a 2, this can't be an 8, and if this can't be a 2, this can't be an 8. Okay, right, well again, unfortunately, I'm not having any clever ideas at all about this. So let's use the fact that we know that these dominoes all contain 2-digit primes. So they must all end, actually they must all end in an odd number, and that number can't be 5, because if they end in a 5, 5 would be a divisor of the total, and that's not going to work. So we must have 1, 3, 7 and 9 in all 9 of these squares. Now that can't be a 1, this can't be a 1, these can't be 1s. Ah, there's a 3, 7, 9 triple in this column, look. Okay, well I can see there's a 3, 7, 9 triple, but I can't see how to use that. I don't think it can be the diagonals, can it? Ah, maybe it's the central square. Look, this 51 and 57 are divisible by 3, so this central domino has to be either 53 or 59. Okay. Ah, here's something. We know that the 2 is at the top of the magic square somewhere, so it's in one of these 2 positions. So this square must be interesting, because this can't be a 1 or a 3. So if, for example, this was the 2, then, and we know these 3 squares add up to 15, then we can't have 1 or 3 here. This would have to be a 7, which would make that a 6, or a 9, which would make that a 4. But this, yeah, it's a nice setting, isn't it, actually, because whichever one of these 2s that applies to, this square is always pincered, basically. So this square has that restriction uniquely operating upon it. And I guess the corollary of that is that that can't be a 7 or a 9. Obviously, that has to be a 1 or a 3. Okay, so... now here's something interesting. Look, this 1, if this was a 1, where would we put the 1 in this box? Well, because of the king's move constraint, neither of those squares could be a 1. Because of this one, neither of those squares could be a 1. That can't be a 1, so the 1 would have to go in the corner. Now, obviously, the fact that the 1 would have to go in the corner is interesting, but it's not. It doesn't mean that it does. So... But this definitely feels important. These 3 and this quadruple here, or triple, however you want to see it, that there's something. This is getting my spider senses tingling, because everything else is too open. There's no restriction. So this square, whatever is in this square, won't appear in those squares, or those two squares. So whatever appears in this square will be in one of those two squares. Now that... okay. Okay, now the interesting thing about these two squares is that they both see, in a Sudoku sense, this square look. Because let's actually use an example. If this square is a 7... we now know there's a 7 in one of those two squares, but if it's here, this won't be able to be a 7 because it'll have a 7 in the column. And if the 7 is here, this is a king's move away from this square. So whatever we put in this square can't appear in this square. So why does that matter? Have we got a similar thing going on down here? We've got... No, it's less powerful. It's less powerful here, because if this is a 3, the 3 can go in one of two positions. But the two positions that are seen in this box, well, these two positions see this square, which is unrestricted. So it must be this one. This is the square we've got to focus on. So... okay, so whatever in this square can't be in this square. I've got it. I've got it. This is it. This is it. This can't be a 7. This can't be a 7. Watch this. If this is a 7, we now know that the 7 in this box is in one of these two cells. So this square can't be a 7 for the reasons I explained. Now, let's have a look at this digit here. This is a 3 or a 9. So, if this square is a 3 or a 9, this will be divisible by 3, because 33, 39, 93 and 99 are all divisible by 3. So, if this is a 7, you have to make this a 7. But that doesn't work, because I've now put two 7s in my magic square. What a beginning that is. Good grief. So, this square has to be a 9, and we get our second digit in the puzzle. This is not a 9. We now know the 9 is in one of those squares. Actually, we know loads of things now. This puzzle is going to be, I'm hoping, a little bit easier now, because all of a sudden, once you get the 9 here, look, 9, we know these three squares have got to add up to 15, so that's got to be a 1. We now know these two squares have to add up to 14, so they've got to be 6 and 8. These two have got to be 3 and 7, because they can't be 1 and 9, because 1 and 9 are used up. And these two squares have got to be 2 and 4. Now, presumably, we're going to be able to... Well, 93 is impossible because 93 is not prime. Uh, 3-7 pair here. This being a 1, we can go back to the logic we did earlier. Where do I put a 1 in this box? Well, it's got to be, because of this one, it can only be in the corner. So there's a 1 in one of these two squares. This could be 13, 17 or 19. So, sorry, I'm sure that I'm missing something now. That can't be a 1. So if this was a 6, that would have to be a 7, but that is prime. If this is an 8, it could be a 3 or a 9. This can't be a 1. Look, we've got 1s in both of those cells. So this would be a king's move away from both positions and would prevent there being a 9. Oh, sorry, a 1 in box 9. So this one has to be 3, 7 or 9. That's a triple there now. So we need to put a 1 in this column, and it can't go here. Oh, it can't go there. That's on the diagonal. It's in one of 3 positions. That's completely useless. Got it. I've got it. It's this 3, 7. Oh, that is brutal. This 3, 7 and this 3, 7 here. Now, if we try and put 7 into this square, what happens? Where do we now put a 7 in this box? We can't put one in, because this 7, of course, by king's move, rules out that square. We know this has to not be a 7, it's a 3 or a 9, so there would be nowhere to put a 7 in this box. Oh, that's beautiful as well. So this is a 3. That means that's a 7, because it can't be 39. 39 is not prime. Now that must be a 7 now. This must be the 3. So we've got 53 here. This isn't 3 anymore. This, of course, is part of our magic square, which makes that one a 7. That must be a 3. Okay, how are we doing now? So we've got, if this is a 3, this can't be a 2. That has to be the 4. That has to be the 8. The magic square is finished now. So we get that done. That looks correct. This can't be 27. 27 is not prime. That means 67 is prime. That looks good. Okay, 49 isn't prime, so that must be 43. This must be 89, therefore. 90. No, 91 isn't prime. It's divisible by 13, isn't it? 13 times 7 is 91. This has to be a 7. This has to be a 9. And we've done all our primes. So we've done our magic square. We've done our prime number dominoes. Now maybe we do some Sudoku. Boo hiss. Yeah, I can put a 9 there. Look, that's these 9s operating. Must be a 9 in one of those 2 squares. Got to try and remember the king's move here. That's a 9 by Sudoku as well. 9s live it over on the left-hand side of box 4. Oh, 9s here, look. 9s have to be in one of those 2 squares. Now, actually, there's a few ways we can resolve this. One way would be to note that this can't be a 9 because it would rule out both positions in box 6. The other way is to note that the 9s on this diagonal have not been placed yet. So if we're going to put a 9 on the diagonal, it's got to go there, which fixes that as the 9 in this box, because it can't touch. That fixes the 9 here. Have I done all the 9s? Yes, I have done all the 9s. Maybe 7s now? Yeah, look. Yeah, in fact 7's here. I can just put one in the grid. 7 goes there. 7's in one of these two positions. So 7 is not yet being placed on this diagonal. Look, we've got a 7 here and a 7's here and here, both off the diagonal. So 7 has to go there. Ah, and 7 is off the diagonal, the other diagonal as well. So it must be on the diagonal in box 3, which fixes the 7 down here. I think we've done the 7's. Now, what should we look at next? I'm trying to see which digit we've got a lot of. Oh, 5's. 5 is very powerful here on this box, look, because we can't put it in any of those squares because of the king's move restriction. So the 5 lives in one of those two cells, one of those two cells. Oh. Oh, where do we put 1 on this diagonal? It can't go here, and it can't go here because of these two ones. So it must be on the diagonal there. We get a 1 here. And this one sees that cell because of the king's restriction. So there's a 1 in one of those two cells. 1 must live in one of those two positions, so it must be in one of these two positions. So 1 in this box. Oh yeah, 1 in this box is locked into one of those cells adjacent to the corner. Ah, now, look, we can do some Sudoku here, because this box I've not put a 5 into yet. So if we look at where the 5 can go in this box, it's got to go in one of those cells. Now that's column 8 and column 9. Now the 5 in this box is also in column 8 or column 9. So I can't put any more 5's in column 8 and column 9 in box 3, because if I do, there will be 3 5's in those columns, and we know there will only be 2 in the finished solution. So the 5 must live in one of those two cells. So this diagonal now, we have not put a 5 on this diagonal. So it must, so it has to go here. These 5's rule it out of those squares. So this one has to be a 5. So that means the 5 is in one of those two cells. That fixes the 5 in this box. Fixes the 5 here as well using Sudoku. 5's again. They're not on the diagonal, this diagonal yet, because of these 5's. So there must be a 5 on this diagonal here. So 5's have got to be in one of those two cells. Oh, and one of those two cells. So with 4 boxes, we've not managed to put the 5's in yet. This column, look, we've got 6 digits now in column 1 of the grid, so we need to place 3, 4 and 8. 3, 4 here. This is an 8. This must be a 3 or a 4. Can't see how to do that. That one, no. Okay. 8's are off this diagonal again. It's just so clever. This is why art is so brilliant. It's just, every step is just intricate and beautiful. Now let's do the same on this diagonal. I've not put 8 on this diagonal yet, so that must be 8. Must be an 8 in one of those two cells. An 8 in one of these two cells. Now 8 over here I think can be in one of 3 positions. I don't know whether to pencil that or not. No, I don't need to. I tell you why I don't need to. This 8 down here, where do I put an 8 in this box? It's got to go there. So that means there's an 8 in one of these two cells. So these two squares have got to be 2 and 6, I think, to complete that diagonal. These two squares must be 1 and 4. I'm not sure if we can... Apologies if you're seeing ways of resolving those. Oh, look, this row, we need 2, 5 and 6 to complete it, so... So that square's restricted now, because that... Yeah, this square can only be an 8. It can't be 1. It can't be 2. There's a 2 in its box. It can't be 3. It can't be 4. It can't be 5, 6, 7 or 9. That has to be an 8. That places an 8 there, look, which means this is a 5 if we trust our pencil marks, and I do. Now those 5s are bouncing into these pencil marks, look. So I think, again, we can place a 5 on this side. That places a 5 at the top. That places the 5 on this side. Okay, so it's going nicely, but I don't want this to... These two squares, look, have got to be 3 and 4 to complete this row. Can't see how to resolve that. Oh, I tell you what though, where do we put 2 in row 8 of the grid? This 2 here rules out those two squares. That one can't be a 2. We've only got 3 and 4 to put in there because of the 2 at the top. That's a 2. Oh, that's going to fix the 2 and the 6 in the middle. This 6 sees that square. Oh, it doesn't matter because of the 2. It does the same thing. 2 and 6 like that. This 2 is powerful on this box. Look, it locks the 2 into one of 2 positions because it sees this one by the king's move constraint. This diagonal. I've not finished this diagonal either. What do I need for that? I need a 4 and a 6. I'm sure I can resolve that, but I can't see how. This column we need to put 2 and 6 into. The 6 here tells us this one can't be a 6. That's a 2. That fixes the 2 over there. That must be a 2 by Sudoku. Place the 6 as well, don't forget that. That's a 4. That fixes that diagonal. That must be a 6 by Sudoku. That's a 3. That's a 4. That should be a 3 then, should it? Yeah, that looks good. 4, 3. That's a 4 by Sudoku. This should be a 6, I think. Don't want to make a mistake now. This solve is going relatively smoothly for once. This must be a 4 at the top. I need to put a 3 into one of those squares, which I can do. That fixes the 1. That should be a 2, I think. Yeah, that looks all right, doesn't it? That square must be writable. That's a 4. So let's have a look at these. We need 1, 6 and 8. So that's a 1. This is a 6, 8 pair. The 1 fixes the 1, 4 in the middle. That fixes that this is a 1, which should give us this square as a... Is that a 4? And we get a 6. We get an interesting. We get a 6, 8, 6, 8 pair. Deadly pattern unless I... Yes, the 6 here is going to disambiguate it all. Look. This can't be a 6 because it would be a king's move away from its friend. So we go 6, 6, 8, 8, check. And that is how to solve yet another masterpiece from Aard van der Wetering. Oh, what? It's just a beautiful puzzle. The logic at the start was stunning. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let us know in the comments. We do read them. And we'll be back later with another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.